Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
Let's dance. Put on your red shoes and dance. UnSpun.
You rocking your David Bowie. What the hell's going on, George-Affleck?
Well, I've heard a lot of people talking about this, and actually my kids were out for Halloween, and there was like, there's just, you can't dance yet anywhere. It's weird, and I know, I don't think people think about it, but it's something that's sort of strange that as we move into normal life, dancing is still not permitted. Like, where is Kevin Bacon when you need him, right?
I know. It's interesting because I've received a number of DMs from people that are like, why were people dancing at this concert and you're not allowed to? And how come you got a mask off at the Canucks game and you can't stand? And I told you I went to see a show at the Rickshaw Theatre a number of weeks ago now. It was when we were first able to sort of gather and watch live music. I was really just thrilled to see live music indoors for the first time. And yeah, it's super weird. But the public health officials are not trying to outlaw dancing like
no,
Footloose.
It's not like Footloose.
But I get where you're going with it because it's like,
yeah, I mean, I think people are just wondering because Christmas is coming, New Year's Eve. You know, you kind of want to, when you hear music, generally you want to dance. So
and you were allowed to dance outdoors. And now we all have to go indoors, which makes it difficult. You know what? Can I just hold on a second?
So
I always keep my social media open while we're doing this. And I just see this update from Premier-Horgan. The surgery and biopsy that were done last week were successful, and I'm grateful to the amazing healthcare team for all the support I've received. The pathology confirmed that the growth in my throat was cancerous.
Oh, no.
My prognosis is good, and I expect to make a full recovery. In the next couple of weeks, I will need to start radiation treatment. Will conclude toward the end of December. During that time, I will continue to participate virtually. Oh, my goodness.
Wow. You know, it's, and best wishes to him. Obviously, anybody who's been, I know you have with your mom and, you know, whole cancer stuff.
My mom, my dad, my stepdad, all three of them, without early detection, George, would be dead.
It's interesting your column this week is kind of relevant then, in a way, isn't it?
Can we talk about that
more
here?
Relevant. Yeah, I mean, I think we usually talk about it at the end, but I think it's actually connects quite well to this.
It does. I dropped my puppy. I got to get a puppy.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Got to keep our puppies on. 1st, we'll get to Remembrance Day in a second. But okay, so writing my column this week, I've lost count, George, of the number of people who have reached out to me and said, do you know a doctor that's accepting patients? I have asked I'm one of the very lucky people who has a GP. I count myself very lucky that I have somebody who knows me, somebody I can call if I have a question or especially in the last 20 months, my goodness. Yeah. But my son has a pediatrician and he's had the same pediatrician since he was 18 months old when we moved here from Toronto. And we got the letter from her last month saying, you know, I'm done. Come and get your file.
Retiring?
Retiring. Stepping away from practice. She's going into the teaching piece a little bit more. So she's and it really, like, how do I explain that to my now 14-year-old? Yeah. You know that doctor you've trusted your whole entire life? Yeah, she's not around anymore. It's really weird. And then thinking about people who have Bob Kronbauer on Twitter.
I saw that tweet. Yeah.
25 years, George.
Talk about that. I know, that's crazy. I mean, I've had the same doctor. Now, I also had the same doctor growing up, and then when I moved out, I got a doctor when I was 23, I think I was, and he's still my doctor. And I don't know how he's still my doctor. He's got to be pushing 80, but he looks great.
He looks great. He's good.
Tell me what to make me like you.
That's right. You want a healthy doctor, that's for sure. But I mean, how about the yearly physical? I mean, come on, that's not a lost art. We should be doing that.
I just did mine. I'm doing my blood test next week. I had my appointment a couple of days ago. I do it every year. My dad died of a heart attack at 49. So ever since then, I've gone to annual checkups, blood tests, heart checks, all that kind of stuff. Because, you know, it's the blood of your family. It's like it's important to know that kind of history and assume it's going to be something you're going to have a challenge with. So, but it's amazing. Yeah, your column was interesting, and you had some solutions in there, which I thought was interesting. And we don't want to get too much into it because people should read it at the Orca.
Yes.
But you know, there are some interesting solutions which could be controversial and are probably controversial because I think they've tried a little bit of this.
It's a little bit controversial in that it's propping up a broken system. I've learned a lot in the last couple of days, really, about nurse practitioners and what makes a nurse practitioner versus a registered nurse. Have a read of the column at the Orca.ca, of course. And also be aware that this coming week, Remembrance Week, is also National Nurse Practitioner Appreciation Week. So here are these individuals, men and women, who were full RNs, who went back to school and at least have a master's. Okay. Yep. So, and then some. So they just not gone, they can have a doctorate as well. They just haven't gone down the full path of becoming a physician, but they can take patients, assess, and prescribe. So having the nurse practitioner team as part of your medical upkeep, if you will, like trying to just stay ahead of things. Like that's what my column is about. And there's a lot of information to be learned on that. I always try, I try and come in with some kind of solution. I am certainly A, not blaming anybody for our broken medical system. B, not saying our medical system is superior or worse than any other medical system in the world. However, when you look south of the border, my parents just moved back to Canada after living in the States for the better part of 30 years. And they keep reiterating how incredible our healthcare system is here. And they've always had all the insurance that you possibly need in the US. And still they feel that the care here is exponentially better. So
it's more consistent, I think, based on what I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, and your column is provocative, it always is, and that's the point. Get people talking about these issues and see if we can move the goalposts or change the conversation or progress or whatever that might be. So, I mean, for sure. And I think it's important for everybody to go see a doctor once a year. I have two sisters who are nurses and three nieces now that are nurses.
Wow.
So there's lots of nurses in my family. And it's it's an incredible job. And I'm not the personality, and my other sister is not there's the two of us and the other two, and we're quite different as personalities. So there's a kind of personality that gets into nursing.
Yeah.
But the question should be asked that you're asking in your column. So definitely read it.
I'm glad that you feel that way, George. Thank you for that. I do like to spark a conversation. I don't need to be right. I just want to get people talking.
I only know
you, on the other hand. Let's talk about some. I love that. Let's talk about another piece of this puzzle when it comes to healthcare. I mean, we talk a lot, and I've written columns. You've talked about it. The pillars that are required in order to help with the other epidemic of the tainted drug supply and the mental health crisis, the homelessness crisis, that are all dovetailed together, and seeing, on average, 6 people a day dying needlessly, it feels, by this tainted drug supply. And so the announcement this week from our PHO and really the provincial health teams that are saying, listen, let's decriminalize small possession of illicit drugs that are right now illicit drugs in that category, right? We're talking cocaine and heroin and meth and all of those scary drugs that nobody really wants to talk about. And yet at the same time, if we don't talk about it, we don't help the people who are literally dying because they're addicted to these drugs and perhaps are self-medicating because they didn't have mental health supports, which leads all the way back to our broken healthcare problems
and our housing problem and I mean, this is and by the way, you had a poppy on when we started, but it's disappeared. Where did your poppy go?
It's there.
Oh, it's up there. There we go.
I fell off my shirt because it didn't have a place. The pin on the poppy, we really should come up with a way to keep them
on. Really should. I could, because it's right behind your mic, which I think is all. There we go.
There we go.
Come on, Jody.
Better?
You're the one who told me to show up.
I know. I'm like, get your poppy on, George-Affleck.
So yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think the police, when I was in office, it was a question that was asked a lot too about this decriminalization. And, people often get that confused with legalization of drugs. And that's not what this is about. This is about small quantities. But it's also, it begs the question about how many things are we going to continue to do while still not solving the problem. And the problem seems to get worse and worse and worse. We keep, okay, now we're going to decriminalize, now we're going to do this, now we're going to that, we're putting more money here, we're going to do this, blah, and nothing ever seems to change. And I don't know if you saw last week with John Oliver, last week he talked about homelessness. His whole thing was about homelessness and mental health, and it was a topic about America, and there's 500,000 homeless people, but he, obviously that number's underestimated. This issue of homelessness and drug addiction and all these things is not just a Canada or certainly not just a Vancouver issue. And I think it starts with, housing for sure. And that's what he talked a lot about on his show. the housing first concept that we're so far behind. And I think I tweeted out a couple of weeks ago about the numbers. It shows that, since 1990, the decline in housing provided by the federal government is huge, and it almost adds up to the amount of people that are homeless in Canada.
It almost does. It's so true, George, and that goes back to what you just said with regard to the issue of the opioid crisis. Is we seem to be constantly talking about it and making announcements about it, and yet nothing changes, nothing tangible happens to help save our fellow citizens. These are people. These are human beings. If I see one more slick video from City Hall about all the things that have been done well, I mean,
you didn't like Kennedy's video?
I did not enjoy it, I have to say.
For really those feel who, you maybe tell them a bit about what this video is. It came out a couple of days ago.
It basically is, and if Kirk LaPointe of Business in Vancouver is right, and this was paid for with City Hall taxpayer dollars, I'm even more upset about it. But it's basically an advertisement to have people recognize his face and his name with a whole bunch of green check marks beside a whole bunch of things that are, perhaps spin, George. I want to say there's
he's taking credit, by the way. He's taking credit for this, and Justin McElroy pointed this out for the 90% number of people who have been vaccinated. In Vancouver. I'm thinking, you've basically been invisible for this past 2 years. You haven't done a lot about that issue, and I haven't seen you be a leader on that front. So taking credit for that. Gregor did this all the time. Gregor Robertson did this kind of stuff, and I'm pretty sure most of the things that those videos he created were also with taxpayers' money. And I always would argue, why don't you just put all of us in these videos? If we're going to celebrate City Hall and what we've done, hey, why not have all council be a part of it? And, if you're going to celebrate what we've done, maybe I voted against a lot of stuff and didn't agree with them all the time, but there were many things that I did support. And, you don't have to have, me talk about those things, but, we could, if you're going to celebrate City Hall, then talk about all the council staff, whatever, the people that come and spend their time there, the volunteers, the groups that are there, that are these volunteer groups. I mean, the community centers. There are lots of things to celebrate in Vancouver, and it shouldn't just be about the mayor. And to use taxpayer dollars to that is so blatantly electioneering, but it's not uncommon. It's pretty standard procedure, certainly in Vancouver. But just disappointing. One more nail in his electoral coffin, potentially, I think, for October next year.
I think it smacks is incredibly tone deaf to put out a campaign video like that with so many green check marks at a time where this city is at its worst that it has been.
But they're in budget time, and their budgets are ridiculous. And the only things I've read about it is councillors saying it's not enough. Mike Weep saying we need more money. We're not going to be able to implement all the things that we talked about. Yeah. Duh. That's, certainly you and I have talked about this the last, 3 years, that this council's understanding of how money works. And you can have these lofty goals, but you have to be realistic about where the money comes from. And this budget, and then they mandate through the mayor's motion to cap the tax increase it to 5%. So it's like you basically cut off all the ideas
where the money comes
wasted all this time on. Because they're not going to happen in this term. And this council, the likelihood of this council, the same makeup being here next time, we've got so many people running for mayor. I saw a tweet the other day saying, and I agree with this, and I think we've talked about this too, there are so many people running for mayor, and we don't have to name them all. But there's one tweet, and I kind of agree. We don't know, the person who's going to be the next mayor has yet to announce. And I think that's interesting, because we've talked about some names out there that are possible. And I don't know why these guys are starting so early. They're going to be exhausted. I mean, John Cooper has got by September next year, he'll be so tired he won't want to be mayor.
There's a lot to be done, man. I tell you, there's a lot. Yes. I want to see some meaningful, actionable platforms laid out. So, like you said, we'll see.
I'll be the judge of those.
I know, right? We'll talk about them here on UnSpun.
I look forward to those.
Can we go back to the provincial politics just for a second? What the hell happened with Kevin Falcon's campaign person? Like, what? Who berates somebody else for 15 minutes ever?
I don't even understand the scenario, though, that's even possible in this day and age, given how the world has changed just in the last couple of years with the Me Too movement. I mean, I don't, so this was Kevin, some senior person, I think, on the campaign team, berating the campaign manager for Michael Lee's campaign. It's fairly, talked about now a lot in the media. Two things come to mind. One is, well, how could that happen? That was interesting. Why would she go public with it? This is an internal, obviously, situation that is not a good look for the BC Liberals and doesn't help any of them. But obviously, for whatever reason, she felt the need to go public with this because either she wasn't getting satisfied with what response. I don't know.
That's what I heard. That's in her original messaging. She's like, the reason I'm doing this is because I reported it to the proper channels and got nowhere. Yeah. And that just doesn't land well. That does not land well. We need to be able to have meaningful and swift consequences for this type of behavior, period. Like, I don't care what political leaning you have or what have you. Like, I'm on this mission when it comes to harassment. This man publicly harassed this woman for 15 minutes to the great discomfort of others around. And there's the okay culture as well, George. Like, I will tell you that there was a time in my career as a broadcaster that I saw things happening around me that I was like, okay, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I should have done something about whatever I saw before me, which today I would stand high on my soapbox and fix. I've learned a lot over these decades in between, and I want to see our political leaders learn as well. I think this is a very big turning point, a pivot moment for not just this particular scenario, but on a broader scale and a broader sense.
Well, it's going to be interesting for this campaign because they all said, this is not going to get ugly. This is not going to get ugly, this leadership campaign. It's hard not to get ugly in politics. It generally gets ugly, especially leadership races. They because it works, to get dirty is an effective political move. So the gloves are off, I would say now. And I think we're going to see some pretty interesting stuff. Hopefully not that horrendous, but in other ways too. You're going to see some stuff probably coming out about the candidates. I don't know. It's like, so it's but that's politics. But that kind of, I don't understand how that's even possible in this day and age. That
I don't understand it either.
Like,
what the hell? What the actual hell is happening here? Also under the category of what? You see Conservative leader Erin O'Toole fully politicizing whether or not flags should be lowered or raised in order to be lowered for Remembrance Day. Flags are all at half staff across the country because of acknowledging the unmarked graves of First Nations and Indigenous children being found, thousands found so far. Like, this is an awakening in our country. And here's Erin O'Toole being like, what we need to do is this.
Yeah. Well, Ellis Ross, going back to the campaign, he's also been very vocal about putting the flags back up. So, it's...
but I want to finish my statement because therein lies the answer, George. It's not up to Erin O'Toole. It's up to Kepke Roseanne Archibald at the Assembly of First Nations. But isn't that where we are? Wait, let me just finish before we argue. Let me just finish my thought, because where are we at if not asking the Indigenous peoples of this country how they feel about it? Because they might just say, raise the flag and lower it for the veterans, and then raise the flag and lower it for the children. They might say that, but we're so busy Erin O'Tooling it up. Yes, it's a verb.
Yeah, of course. No, and I think that the flag itself has become, we're stuck now. It literally is stuck in the middle of the flagpole for God knows how long, because the solution to this problem is going to take a long time.
And it's not symbolic.
And when is that decision going to be made? And how is that? Okay, sure, you're going to pull the First Nations across Canada. I don't know. It's an awkward political situation to be in by any standard. It's like, there are, like Ellis, like O'Toole, they're saying, let's put the flagpole back up. Let's put the flag back up on the pole. It's only a matter of time before somebody realizes, hey, let's just make the flagpole twice as high, and then it'll be. It's like, how do we deal with this? It's what is the terms that this flag can go back up then? Who's going to decide that? And it has to be a consensus, of course, with First Nations, but also everybody else. I mean, we have to talk about this issue, and it's a reminder, a literal, figurative, visual reminder to us that there's something wrong in this country that we need to fix. And I suppose that's what this is all about. But it's also potentially people will just start forgetting about it because it's just there. And then it becomes, that's just a flag that flies at that level all the time in Canada, because we'll never see it go, back up again to the full level. So it loses its meaning.
I understand that the initial lowering of the flags was going to be 215 days. That was my understanding when the flags were first lowered, that they would be that way for 215 days. Somewhere in there in the planning of that, people didn't realize that within that 215 days of a 365-day year, Remembrance Day happens, right? Like this is just a symptom of a planning problem, in my opinion. And I personally, and I have veterans in my family, I've had the conversation with those who are currently serving, and most don't really think that the flag is the most important piece of the puzzle. The most important piece of the puzzle is to never forget.
Remember.
Yeah.
Remember.
So let's go to Glasgow. Not Glasgow, but Glasgow. Let's go to Glasgow.
Did you get some training from Amanda? I get mispronouncing names in Britain.
I love her.
Leicester Square, not Leicester. And never say downtown London. You want to drive Amanda crazy.
Okay.
For those who don't know Amanda, my partner, she's a Brit. And I bug her. I go, oh, well, let's go to downtown London. She's like, oh, there's no such thing as downtown London.
What? There's no such thing as downtown London. What is it?
It doesn't exist.
It's just London.
I
love her. No, that's fantastic. I know. Yes, I do. Glasgow. There are no cows in Moscow or Glasgow. I learned that in social studies. So that goes back a long time. There are no cows in Glasgow or Moscow. It's not Moscow. It's not Glasgow.
I'm trying to remember how I pronounce Moscow.
Anyway, Glasgow is where COP26 is happening. This is where all of the leaders have gathered together with what, I don't know if you heard David Attenborough's speech to the UN.
I saw a little bit of it, yeah.
Man.
The guy's like 95. He's like still going strong. It's crazy.
It was like his plea to world leaders to just know that this is the moment. This is the moment in history that will be looked upon as to whether or not the facts of the matter are taken, and really what's happening around us, we're all seeing it. And I got to say, like listening to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speak about Canada and how we are warming at a rate twice as fast as other places. We're having extreme weather, the heat dome. He mentioned Lytton specifically, talking about the Arctic. Yeah. Our north is warming at even a higher rate, or having the impacts of climate change at even I believe it was a 5 times rate. Like it's big. And even, the Joe Bidens of the world that are just saying, we've got to make change here. And we're starting to hear economic pieces of the puzzle come into play. Yeah. Banks getting on board. It's like,
Yeah, and oil industry. And Trudeau was really pushing hard the whole, carbon tax concept. That if every country did that, the problem would be solved. And guess where the carbon tax was invented? Really, it was here in British Columbia by Gordon Campbell, and it was revenue neutral. So there was an incentive to modernize your plants because and to otherwise you get taxed. So but it's not really loved across Canada, and it's certainly not something the Americans ever going to pull off. There's no way Biden could ever create a national carbon tax in America. So the question is, they're just throwing money at it in America. That's how they're dealing with it. $2 trillion or $3 trillion investment. Big chunk of that goes into climate initiatives. I don't know if the whole carrot stick thing is, always the challenge in politics. And I think you throwing money at stuff as a government never works that well. You want to incent people some way, and if there are strategic grants and things like that, maybe. But generally, you need to motivate people through different initiatives. And taxes are a great way to get businesses motivated. And we know coal is one of the biggest challenges in Canada. Exports a lot of dirty coal from America. Because Americans can't export it from the West Coast. So they send it up here.
That's what our superport is, right over there.
Yep. That's why they need that bridge. in not only in Vancouver but in Surrey and all these other areas, in Delta. So but it's funny because we live in Canada and we see reports and from the Trudeau perspective, obviously, because I just wonder where he played. If I were to watch a newscast somewhere else, if I was in another country right now, he's a minor player in the world stage. Yeah. No offense, Canada. Sorry, guys.
As the Canadian correspondent for Al Jazeera English, I can tell you in monitoring my station, if I'm not talking about him, he's not on there.
Yeah. So
that's you're right. We of course are obsessed with our news within this country, and we need to be engaged in our news in this country. But Trudeau can stamp his feet all he wants on the podium at COP26, and it's really not going to influence what China does.
No, and even if we have, I hope that people look to Canada, and I hate there's a lot of stuff going on in Canada, the environmental movement, and saying we're not doing enough. But comparatively, we're still doing. There's some really interesting stuff happening in Canada when it comes to, even the carbon tax, but other stuff that we're doing that we should be proud of, and I hope that other countries start looking to as examples. And a lot of that started here in BC, as I said, and I think. But you look at other countries, Australia, they don't seem interested. China and Russia, not really.
Less
interested.
The Scandinavian countries. Scandinavia is getting it done.
Okay, so we got Scandinavia and Canada. Doing all the work, all the heavy lifting.
All the heavy lifting.
For the population. Cumulative population of those places, what about
California,
50 million, 60 million?
California and New York. Oh man, but I mean, we got to go down swinging. I mean, the Attenborough speech for me, hopefully resonated with some, because if there isn't actionable pivot to 1.5, which is what everybody's trying to. What are we at 1 minute to midnight on the doomsday clock or something?
We talk about this a lot, and we talked earlier about the vaccination and COVID, and we've mentioned this together many times, and we talk about the homelessness stuff. We talk about the environment. Can we not, please, world, look what we did in 2 years.
2 years.
Together. We have a template of working together and getting something done really, really, really quickly. And why we can't seem to pull this off for housing and homelessness, and drug addiction and opioid overdoses and the environment. I don't understand it. It's just sad, really, that we can't get our act together as a globe.
Are you running for mayor?
Society
Are you running for mayor? Everything you just said right there, I'd vote for you. I would. Can't we just work together? I'd love somebody to stand up in City Hall and just say that out loud. We stop all this.
Strongly worded letters to other
levels. Oh my God. Okay.
That'll really show how
Never mind. I changed my mind. Follow along on Twitter, George_Affleck. I'm Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter. You're going to be filling in on the Mike Smith show. Yeah, on the 12th of November. So, okay, well, we got to make sure we promo that in next week's. We're doing next week, even though it's a.
We'll have to figure that out, actually.
Holiday. Okay, we will. Maybe it'll be a little early next week.
Maybe Wednesday we'll record.
Maybe we'll do it. Yeah, maybe we'll do it. So go to the Orca.ca, sign up for the Fin. I had a couple people reach out to me and say, I listened to your podcast, then I signed up for the Fin. Oh my God, I love it. Because you get the big splash, the big story of the day, plus McLean K reads all of the major publications. I know.
And there's a little blurb to give you an outline of what the story is about. So it saves you time, and it's unbiased. He puts everything in there. You look at even the other podcasts that there's us, there's Elected, which is a very interesting podcast.
That is a good one.
And that
the bcpoli hot stove.
Yeah. And those
that
guys.
Was for you, George.
Those guys. Those hacks. All right, let's get out of here before we get in too much trouble.
Here's to 42 communications, people.
Oh.
Cheers, George.
Cheers. See you next week.
Cheers.